have Dr. Stefan presenting for us. Dr. Stephansen is a postdoctoral researcher at the Center of Quantitative Genetics and Genomics at Aarhus University. He's an agrobiologist specializing in quantitative genetics with a strong interest in green station of global food production. His research focuses on developing genetic tools to improve feed efficiency and reduce greenhouse gas emission in cattle through systematic breeding. Dr. Stephansen is also a member of the ISCAR working group feed and gas, which aims to establish global standards for recording and quality control of feed intake and gas emission, dairy and cattle, to support accurate breeding value assessments. So I'll turn it over to now Dr. Stephansen and can get started.
Yeah, thank you, and I hope the sound is good. Yeah, good. So I'll present this work here, what I'm working on at QTG, genetic improvement of feed efficiency and methane. And the first part on feed efficiency is very much also related to my PhD that I defended almost a year ago, and then also my more recent work on the methane. Little about me as person. Actually, I'm raised on a dairy farm in the western part, as you see up here in Denmark. And it's actually me in the Reds close there. So my dad was on the Holstein board in Denmark, so I think that's where the interest for breeding came from. But also I have a little, you could say, different background. So I first educated from the Danish Farm School in economics, and then I also had a profession bachelor at the Business Academy Aarhus. Where from I took, as you mentioned, the agrobiology, a master in agrobiology, and then I last year defended in November my PhD dissertation on genetic improvement of feed efficiency in dairy cattle. I also like to introduce this presentation with, you've probably all seen this, I'm from the country with the world's very first tax on livestock. So we now facing a tax on our livestock. And it's only that it's not the crop production, which you might have heard, but it's only on our livestock, both pigs, it's broilers, it's the cattle. And just to give you some insight what it means. It means that we have this, it's called the Danish Green Tri-Party Agreement. We need to reduce 1.8 million tons of CO2 equivalents in 2030. To do that, one of the first things economists always says is, let's put a CO2 tax, use tax, that's efficient. So we have a tax coming from 2030 around 40 euros per ton of CO2, and then that increases to 100 euros per ton of CO2 equivalents in 2035. It's important to say that's not the numbers we'll pay. We have a deduction of 60%, so it's actually only 40% we'll pay, because they also acknowledge that this is biology. However, what is a concern is that this might decrease this number. And then the idea is that if you then manage to apply mitigation tools, so you, for example, we hope breeding or other things, then you can say, in principle, you can come to a point where you don't pay any tax, and that's your incentive. But you could say the income from the tax is supposed to go be redirected through to fund further green transition. But it's actually not the part of the law that is the most concerning part. It's actually this last part here with we'll take 10% of our cultivated area out of agriculture and put forest there. And then also next to that, we also have to take out 140,000 hectares of peatlands and put that back to nature. So it's actually a bigger concern that how to produce the feed for our cows. Next, you probably also maybe heard, I don't know if you heard this, we have a new law that was starting this year where all conventional dairy farmers are now obligated to feed either Bovaer, the methane mitigating feed additive, for 80 days, or have 12 months with a very high level of fatty acids in the diet. So they have to choose this, and right now we see a lot of herds are feeding Bovaer, and it's all subsidized by the Danish state, and actually they can also be subsidized to voluntary feed with it for the whole year, or you could say the remaining part of the year. So you could see I'm trying to set the scene here. So the research rationale, also to add more, is that we also know that 80% of the variable farm cost in Denmark are related to feed. And we have that this methane is correlated to the feed intake, and it's also an energy loss. So you could little look at it this way. If we had this cow and could improve her genetics for efficiency and methane, lower methane, we could both reduce the feed cost and the emissions at the same time. That would increase the profitability of the dairy farm, but also, let's say, mitigate the climate footprint. So we have actually, especially in Denmark, a strong motivation to improve the genetic progress for feed efficiency and methane. And that is leading to the aim of this presentation. So how can we in the Nordic cattle breeding contribute to enhance dairy farm profitability and at the same time lower the Danish farmers' future expenses on a carbon tax? The reason I here mention Nordic farmers is because we are part of the Nordic community when it comes to breeding value estimation. So the first part of my presentation will be dedicated to feed efficiency and how it was implemented, or parts of the results were implemented in the Nordic cattle evaluation. And the second part is more related to the ICAR feed and gas and Nordic breeding values for methane. If we go a bit back to the history of feed efficiency, actually we've done a fantastic job in breeding for many years. So historically we have improved it through a higher milk yield and thereby diluted the maintenance requirements. And we have mainly done that by, you could say, this is a more old-fashioned Holstein cow called Jysk Kvæg in Denmark. And now we have this much more modern, much more dairy cow now. And by increasing the milk yield, we have approximately reduced the proportion of maintenance from around 50-60% of her energy to down to 30%, so diluted it. However, this reaching higher milk yield levels also have a negative effect on health and fertility, so we need to balance that. And that's exactly what we've done in many countries with breeding goals. But if we want to do something about feed efficiency, you'll see I have bring some quotes into this. I really love this one by Peter Drucker, a management thinker. If you can't measure it, you can't improve it. So first of all, we need data. And here we know that for feed efficiency, a crucial part is the feed intake part. And we know that there's a Dutch initiative by CRV that was installing these feed bins. That's one way to say the AI company invests in it. Other second, we also seen these great collaborative initiatives where one of the very successful one is the Resilient Dairy Genome Project, and also, of course, the prior one, EDGP, and also now the one running NDGP, as you all know. Another way we also could look into it is also technological advancements. We know that our dairy farmers are buying more and more technologies to help them in their daily routine. So automatic milking systems, sensors for heat detection, and an emerging technology that we have in Denmark is the cattle feed intake system. So there's a system developed in Denmark that can identify cows, measure body weight, but also their feed intake, which is we're using heavily. But I promise I'll come back to it in a few slides, in some slides, how the system actually operates. Because having the data, you also need to, you could say, put up your definition. And then I also like this quote by George Box that we have that all models are wrong, but some are useful. So it's our task to define which models are useful. So what definition of feed efficiency is useful for us? And if we look into some of the common feed efficiency definitions, we know from growing animals like broilers, pigs, feed conversion ratios are quite popular. But in dairy cattle with the lactating dilemma, it's not so popular. We also have the Dutch approach, I little call it sometimes, where we put feed intake directly into the breeding goal. Or we have the more adapted one, is the residual feed intake that are incorporated into breeding goals through feed saved. I know, for example, you also have that in Canada. We also have it in the Nordics. You also see it around Europe and in US. So that's the one I'll try to stick with for the rest of the presentation, the feed saved. And what it compromises that feed saved is equal to the feed saved from less maintenance requirements and a better metabolic efficiency. You can also view it more graphically. I like how Mike van der Haar and co-authors showed it here graphically. So we have on the left, and you could say an average cow, average body weight, she's average in what she eats. She has an average yield. Then we have her peer, where we have a lower body weight, so she weighs 100 pounds less, so she needs less feed to maintain her body. And we also see that she's more efficient in converting the feed into product, and she keeps the same milk production. So here you see we have 100 plus 93 pounds of feed, and then gives her a feed saved breeding value of 193. If we want to measure and model the maintenance, it's very easy because it's simply the size of the animal, and we can also do it great with indicator traits. However, for metabolic efficiency, it's more hard to measure because we need individual feed intake, and also the modeling of RFI is much more complex, which is what I'll also focus on in this presentation on the feed efficiency part. So therefore, the objectives in my PhD project was to how could we promote genomic models for feed efficiency in the productive lifetime of dairy cattle. And to start with, we also had a review across both. It was not only geneticists, there's also a bunch of nutritionists included in this study, and it also was between NRA and Denmark, this one. So what we dwelled into was first coming back to the background of residual feed intake. So we tried to see how could we maybe refine RFI. If we go into the single trait RFI, in the simplest definition, it is the observed minus the expected feed intake. And if you've probably seen this, if you've been into RFI studies, Mike van der Haar again, here in 16, had this nice figure where you take the observed DMI and then run a least square model phenotypically and regress on milk energy and the maintenance and changes in body weight. And what you see is then you have the predicted body weight on the x-axis and the observed on the y-axis, and then you have the prediction line, and all phenotypes below the prediction line is favorable, and vice versa. These are then, you could say, the residuals here are then genetic evaluated in a second step. However, this model creates some problems, which I will show you in the next slide. Because a multi-trait approach, or you could say more selection index approach, was proposed earliest by Brian Kennedy in 1993 and also adapted by Roald Verkamp in 1995. And we also see in I think it was a really nice symposium review by Rob Templeman and Liu that suggested that if you take the multi-trait approach to calculate RFI, you're better in handling fixed effects because now each of the traits, both DMI, ECM, body weight, have, you could say, their own set of fixed effects. And that's quite important for traits with different means and different variances. And you can also automatically better handle missing data, which the least square can't. However, then you could say it's a no-brainer. Why has this not been adapted before? Well, there's sparse literature because people were always limited by feed intake data. And just to compare it even more, so you see the difference between the two methods. So we see here we have again the DMI, like if we in the figure or in the graph earlier, you have the DMI, you have some fixed effects that needs to correct for all the traits here, and you have some beta values where you regress on ECM and body weight respectively. If we go into the multi-trait RFI, it's a bit more complex. You need more steps. But now you have the covariance matrix between DMI, ECM, and body weight, and then the covariances on the off diagonals. Yeah, so the covariances here between the energy intake and the energy sinks, and then the covariance among the energy sinks. And that is actually what you just see out here in this matrix. And if you then do this calculation, then you could say you use little g prime times large G inverse, then you get, you could say in principle, the same two regressions coefficients as you have up here, but just calculated in a different way, so in a multi-trait setting. And then your breeding value or your animal solution becomes RFI equals the random cow solution or breeding value minus the expected feed intake, which you calculate like this. So you have your regression vector times the animal solutions. But then you could also ask, could we not also improve RFI in other ways? Yes, that's something we looked into. One thing is the energy intake. Most uses DMI today. We showed that actually, you see it here just quickly, we have developed a model where we derived energy density in feed from the RFI model. And using different starting values, it actually showed quite nice convergence properties but please visit the paper for further details. We also know that milk energy actually can be slightly improved, that we're better in predicting if we included fatty acids. It's not where we have the biggest improvement potential. We can also get body weight on more animals by using cameras. We really see this is coming in now, and more companies are working on this to do it on a daily basis. There's also the whole dilemma with body lipids to distinguish between protein and lipid tissue. So you have almost a factor 4 difference in energy content. So and we also know from body condition that can actually be predicted well with camera. However, the main challenge here is that there's a patent around this, which limits companies to go into it. And finally, you have the residual, where I in particular find it interesting to explore. If we could explore, we have the residual variance here in Emily Fisher et al. So we have the milk energy corrected for, we have corrected for the maintenance and body reserve management. But what is this residual compromising? What they suggested on few animals in a phenotypic study is that you could say some was related to activity, feeding behavior, you name it. But this could be interesting to explore. What is it actually we are improving in the animal? So some summary from this first study, we found that multivariate models are preferable to calculate RFI because they're better in handling fixed effects and missing data. And we have also tested the genetic components, which I will come to in the next two parts of the presentation. And we also concluded that actually, especially this part on changes in body reserve is really something that needs to be considered maybe better in the future. And we also have this promising extension of the RFI model that needs further validation regarding the energy density in feed. Good. So moving on to genetic RFI, we tested it on an international data set. So we wanted to estimate novel covariance parameters in this multi-trait and multi-parity GRFI model. And as you could see, we have that was published in 2023 in Journal of Dairy Science with a broad group of authors from North America and Europe. If we look at the data overview, the data was available from Gentor and the RDGP project. So that was really a good experience, I would say, and fun experience to try to collaborate here. And as you could see, we had data from Denmark, Germany, Netherlands, France, multiple states in US, and also I think it was 3 farms or 2 research farms and 1 commercial farm in Canada. And if we look on the data, I was quite keen on that we had a good distribution over the lactations. So I had some strict requirements to number of records per cow per lactation. So see, we actually managed to have quite nice frequency in terms of number of cows with data throughout lactation, as you see here. And then the different colors represents the different countries. And then in primipares, second parity and third parity. I go directly to the genetic correlation. So what we did was here's the dry matter intake, the genetic correlations for dry matter intake in first parity, second, and third parity. And just to show how to read this, so this is a heat map. So each pixel, now we look carefully into the primipares. So each pixel here represents a weeks of lactation. And then the color is the additive genetic correlation. So we see here early lactation, you could say in itself, within the weeks close to each other are very highly correlated. But as you go further down the lactation or throughout lactation, you see the correlation goes down to around 0.5. So what we then can see is that, and we also, let's see here, we see the same pattern for second and even more extreme in third parity. Please remember third parity had the weakest data, so we even see negative correlations. But we also see cows that eat more in first lactation will also eat more in second parity. You can see that from the high correlation on this off-diagonal element here. Yeah. And if we then take the genetic RFI, our, you could say, efficiency goal, we see now we evened out to 0 correlation within parity between early to mid to late in all 3 parities. And we also see moderate high correlation between first parity and second parity here in this element, so mid to late lactation. see that for between and all parities, but also and even also here between first and third parity. However, early lactation seems to be a little bit different, where also the cow has the early lactation dilemma. So we managed here to estimate novel covariance parameters for GRFI. We saw that early lactation differed from mid to late lactation within parity, moderate high genetic correlations across lactations in mid to late, and also moderate genetic correlations across lactation in early lactation. So to us, it shows that it suggests that we should do full lactation recording schemes if we want the highest possible accuracy at selection. Of course, you have a cost-benefit analysis because it's costly to record these. And secondly, we also saw that, well, we still lack here to distinguish between fat and protein tissue. So that was not resolved. So actually, that's why we tried here that's actually the last study in my PhD. There I tried again to model GRFI for 3 Nordic breeds within and across lactations, and also tried to include this new trait, we call it energy balance, estimated from body reserves. And I'll come back to how the phenotype is created, which should allow us to distinguish between protein and fat tissue. The data we had available was feed intake measures from the CFeed system. So this is again Denmark. And we had close to 4,000 Holstein cows with repeated weekly records, a bit more than 2,000 jerseys, and a bit more than 3,000 red cows with data. And then we also included data from our research station in Folum. But just to say that is measured there, the feed intake is measured with the feed intake bins. So we have the Hoko farm at there. Here's what I promised. I also promised to show the CFeed system where I used the data from mainly in this study. So we have these 3D cameras. This is Xbox 3D cameras hanging above the feed bunk. So it takes pictures of the feed bunk and also the cows. And to identify the cows, this is actually the central part here. This is the heart of the system, which is the tunnel where this camera also knows which cows is below it because there is an ear tag reader. And then that is used to train these cameras to identify the cows when they are at the feed bunk. So then now we take one of these cameras again and see from the top view. So you can see we now have some defined cows and some virtual feed boxes. And with an AI algorithm, they are able to, with this system, so it's the CFeed system by Viking Genetics, they are able to make this one. So the red area is where they have consumed feed, and the blue area is where they have pushed feed. So when cows are eating, they always push feed. And if you could say you sum these two numbers, then you have the feed intake of that particular visit of the cow. Good. That was the CFeed data. Then also the body reserve trait we wanted to use. So normally in the previous, when you model body weight random regression, you can actually derive the delta body weight. Or you can also simply calculate it directly from data, but it doesn't allow you to have separate energy coefficient when you're mobilizing and depositing weight, but also it doesn't allow you to distinguish between fat and protein tissue. So therefore, we apply this AB body where you have these coefficients are depending on, so this is for the body protein and the body lipids, and they are depending on the cow is mobilizing or depositing. Since we didn't have body condition available, we applied a method that has been shown to be accurate with frequent body weight measures. So we used that, and then we assumed a fixed changes in the body protein. So we know it's not 100% perfect, but since in absence of body condition records, that was our way to go. And to look a little bit how the phenotype look in different herds across lactation. So we see here an early lactation, so weeks in milk here on the x-axis and megajoule per day. The cows are negative energy balance here in early lactation until around 70 days in milk, and where they go into positive energy balance and then you can say are depositing the weight. And then the question is this giving the same ranking as delta body weight? Well, you could kind of, I guess, figure out that since we used body weight only as input or source of variation, then one should expect high genetic correlations. And this is how it looks. I know it's a busy slide, so I'll try to go through it. I think I will here focus on the primipara Solstein because it's quite similar to multiparas. So this is contour plots. You have the weeks in milk. So we see for dry matter intake, and the more red, you can see here we have high correlations, and then the color, the more you go down to, I don't know what this color is called, but then you go to more negative correlations. So we see again, early lactation is different from mid to late lactation in the DMI. We see cows that produce more also consume more feed, so that makes biologically sense. We also see that cows that are heavier needs more feed to maintain the body. But quite interesting is, we also saw this in the other study with the international data set, there's hardly a genetic correlation between the milk production and the size of the cow. So the cows don't, it suggests that you don't need a bigger animal to produce more milk. And lastly, if we go down here, this is between EB body and delta body weight, we see quite high ranking between those two phenotypes. So you are not changing a lot your decision if you use delta body weight or EB body. And we also see another pattern you might notice here is that we see early lactation, EB body and delta body weight is quite different from late lactation. So this shows that cows that mobilize more in early lactation, they also need to deposit more in late lactation. So makes biologically sense. Here is the genetic correlations for multiparas between DMI and the two GRFI definitions. So GRFI regressed on ECM and body weight, and then EB body or delta body weight. And you see there's hardly any difference in the ranking between those two. So you don't change a lot by choosing one or the other. And we also see that both GRFI definitions both reduces the feed intake. So if you select for the lower values is the better here, then you also get lower body weight. Oh, sorry, dry matter intake, as you should expect from its definition. So some summary, we managed to estimate novel covariance parameters for GRFI. You could say replicated it. It looks quite similar to what we saw in the previous study. We did it for all the 3 Nordic breeds on this CFIT data set. We also saw again here that GRFI varies within and across lactations, and we didn't see the big benefit of using EB body over delta body weight, which was kind of expected. So we keep this also statement that we suggest recording scheme should be in full productive lifetime. However, we still like the BCS phenotype. And due to time constraints, I didn't present this one, but we actually also showed that the CFIT system can predict body condition quite well. But however, the reason we didn't include it is because there's these patent issues around body condition. Now you can see the slides are a little bit changing. So I wanted to bring you presented a few slides on the Interpol and ADSA in Louisville on the updated Nordic model for feed efficiency. So this is actually to show what parts of the result was implemented in the Nordic CAL evaluation. So they decided they don't use the GRFI plus maintenance as I showed earlier, but they now have applied a one-step safe feed where you can say you have the GBV for safe feed is equal to the GBVs for dry matter intake minus the GBV times this fixed regression coefficient, and that comes from feeding norms, and then also the delta body weight, and then multiplied by a regression coefficient. And by leaving out the body weight, you could say then you get the safe feed or feed saved in one step. And if we look on the candidate bulls, we actually see for the last decade actually that they have been behaving quite nice. So we see that we have now a positive genetic trend in almost the past decade. If we then look how does the index correlations look for these 2022 candidate bulls to other traits, we see as expected that we see clear reduction in feed intake. So this is the correlation from this new safe feed breeding value to these other traits. So this is kind of expected. we see that we have a moderate correlation to our breeding goal, so around 0.3. So by breeding for our breeding goal, so NTM is like the LPI in Canada, then we have a genetic progress for our feed efficiency. We also see for the red and yellow breed, or Jersey breed, that we also see a little favorable correlation to production. We don't see clear antagonistic trade-offs in functional traits of fertility and general health. We see for the two large breeds, so Red and Holstein, that we see a reduction in frame by breeding for safe feed, which makes sense because you can say you still have the body weight part in there. So by selecting for smaller body weight, you also should expect smaller frame of the cow. And we also see a little on the other for these. So the summary of that presentation in Louisville was that the updated we presented this updated safe feed index where there's a moderate correlation to the Nordic breeding goal, a more efficient reduction of dry matter intake than the previous model. We had some challenges with that one. And we also saw a no negative correlation to yield, which was a problem in the previous model. And also this index has a large economic value, and they have been available since the early part of this year. Good. So that's actually what I would like to tell you about feed efficiency. Now I'm changing the slides into the more methane oriented and ICAR feeding gas. So this is the slide I wanted to bring. What is the ICAR feeding gas? So ICAR is setting the standards for recording phenotypes for later use in you could say for breeding. So standardizing and harmonizing across countries. And in the ICAR feeding gas working group, we have a dedicated objective of provide a forum and to foster knowledge exchange among researchers. We also update and promote and extend guidelines for phenotyping. You can just, if you want, you can use these QR codes and then you'll see our guidelines on the wiki page of ICAR. And then we also conduct reports and surveys for recording schemes of target traits. And lastly, we also facilitate and coordinate international collaboration and webinars. And also, maybe this is a bad geneticist joke, but as you see, there's we also in this group call this the Manhattan plot, where I got the nickname the significant QTL, but I guess that's mostly a geneticist joke. Right, let's move on. As I told you in the beginning, we have this, you could say, burning platform to do something to avoid our farmers having a tax, that they have to pay a tax. And if we do nothing, well, over generations, nothing will happen with the emissions if we don't do anything. I mentioned the feed additives, we're using that. And if you provide feed additives, they work, and they work constant and temporary, because when you stop feeding it, then your emissions are back to your starting point. And that's why we're really trying to push into our system that genetic selection can actually serve as a different mitigation tool, because it has a cumulative and permanent nature in the way it works. But that's also what gives us a little problem, because when you have to document it, then it's a little more difficult to handle it for the tax authorities, that you have this thing that works cumulative and permanent over generations. Because with a feed additive, it's easy to go and say, okay, you add this to your diet, you have this reduction, and then you are having less tax. But we're really trying to do this, and what is very important is the data. And we need many records, and we need it from private herds. And since we're in a situation where only 70% of our cow population is Holstein, so we also need to help our Jersey farmers and our red dairy cattle farmers. And the way we plan to do it is that we are using the methane sniffer. And I know you're also gaining experience with that in Canada. It's a relatively cheap and cost-effective method. It's not invasive, and it also can give you many records, because it's just recording when the cow here, as you see, are in the robot. And then we have this hose, so it's around here, that are going up to this unit where you see the recording of the methane. The consequences of using it is that it's concentration and not volume we get out of this. It's only milking robotic herds that can do this. For us, it's not a big problem in Denmark, as 1/3 of the herds have robots, and it's rapidly increasing. It's a snapshot method like green feed, so we only get the measures when the cows are there. We don't get full day records. It's quite messy data that you need to do a lot of cleaning in and also correct for because it's heavily affected by its local environment. The sniffer box we use in Denmark is actually a gas card that are normally used for mines and landfills. You see it here. You have the Guardian sniffer here. And we also have a duplex system in it. It's these valves. So we can actually, at each midnight, we can switch to another robot so we can record from, you could say, more robots over different days. And the price we see for this unit is around 10,000 euros. And currently we have 38 sniffer boxes and are expanding to 65 here in 2026. So this is actually something we're really looking into that could hopefully help our farmers to breed for lower methane. And I also told that it's important to clean the data. So the first step you also have, the thing with sniffers are, they don't come with the ID of the animal. So you need to connect that, and that you do from the robot. So we know we have a digital clock in the robot and also on the sniffers. So if you could do some synchronization, then you're good. The only problem sometimes with digital clocks are they are also drifting, like the sniffers in the gas cards. So you need an algorithm, and that's what we have worked heavily on. It's called the data pipeline that can synchronize the data. When you have done that, now we have the ID, and on all these single seconds, then you need to process the data to get a value, so per visit. And so that's the statistical processing. And then you, of course, need to log this data and keep it for in this emission database, as we call it. You can also see it a bit different. So if we look at it here, this is a bit our overview. So we are logging the sniffer data into our database. We also get the robotic data. Right now, it's mainly Lely and De Laval we work with. Then we need CGIL Innovation. It's kind of Lactanet in Canada. So they have the cattle database in Denmark with the calving information and so on. The pedigree and genotypes we need from the Nordic cattle evaluation. We can also we collaborate with them. From Viking Denmark, I know also you have a milk meal in Canada. We also record that at test days at our cows. And then we also have, I think it's around 9 hertz now, where we also have the CFIT technology and together with the sniffer technology. So we also get the feed intake together with our methane. And I wanted to show you a bit of data or some initial results. So I show you some results for Holstein. We had 9 Holstein herds and 5 Jersey herds, so around 4,000 Holstein cows with 600,000 daily observations, and almost 2,000 Jersey cows with 200,000 daily observations for this equipment. And what we see, the methane so this is the methane concentration. In general, the Holsteins is here around 0.16, 0.19 inheritability and a 0.30 repeatability. We see numerically a bit higher for Jerseys. Again, it's very preliminary results, but that's what we observe for now, and similar repeatability. And if we try to compare the Holstein results with what Anouk van Breukelen reported, and also Van Engelen, we see it's quite well aligned how this looks. If we continue this international perspective on what's going on, so one thing is that we now have our methane evaluation. We also know that you have had in Canada since 2023 the MEA predictor methane evaluation, and that you're working on having cows with sniffers. The Netherlands have launched their methane index here in April 2025. We launched one for Holsteins here in May 2025, and then other breeds will follow in 2026 is the plan. We don't have the exact dates, but that's the plan. And then also Spain introduced an index in 2023 based on sniffers by Oscar's group. And there's probably more countries, but these are, you could say, where you also, I know also in France and Belgium, they have some initiatives. And speaking of this, I wanted also to show quickly that we actually are really happy with this collaboration with you guys in Canada, where we have the Global Methane Genetics Jersey Initiative, where we want to accelerate the methane mitigation for the Jersey breed, because you could say methane has many been recorded on Holstein, so why not the Jersey breed? It's a smaller and also some will claim more feed efficient, and we know that you already work on in Canada. We do in Denmark, and then we have also included the World Jersey organization to disseminate results. And when you ask ChatGPT, how does the Dairy Queen look like? Then you get this picture. Just to quickly show you the yellow team, as I call it, it's me and Trine from Denmark, from Aarhus University, and we have our AI company in Denmark, Viking Genetics is also included. From Canada, it's Christine and Filippo and Deborah. From Guelph, University of Guelph and Lactanet, and then the main AI organization in Canada, CEMEX. Then it's also really nice that we have Olivier Boulot, Secretary of the World Jersey, and 10 National Jersey organization has signed that they will help disseminate results and look for further funding. And what we'll do is we'll collect methane in Canada with 12 sniffers and 25 sniffers of Denmark, upload the, you could say, donated data to the Jersey Methane Hub. And we are also open for new countries to join with a fair share principle, and also collaborate with other GMG projects on microbiomes. So we have in this project funding allocated for microbiome sampling 20% of the animals. Build national evaluations tailored for Jersey, and then also disseminate the results by the World Jersey. And we also try to I hope, spread this new hashtag, Go Yellow Cow, in this one. Right, I can see also, I think it's on time. So coming to the take-home messages of this presentation. Now, remembering all the way back to the feed efficiency, multi-trait modeling of RFI is preferable because it's superior in handling fixed effects and missing data. We also see that we had this novel genetic covariances estimated, and we saw that feed efficiency varies genetically within and across lactations, and also recording schemes in full productive lifetime is preferred if you want the highest possible accuracy. There could be, of course, some cost associated that you prioritize differently. For the Nordic setting, we have established an evaluation for Holstein, and we will soon have Jersey and Red. And I think this is really an important take-home message. International collaboration is very important to solve this common climate challenge that we have, because climate gases are not territorial as many models are working. So I think really international collaboration is a key word here. Some perspectives. I'm really happy that the Nordic collaboration decided to implement parts of these results here from February. Looking forward, and also where I'm focusing now a lot of my time and my research is how can we do so breeding becomes an acknowledged mitigation tool. So we likely need a GHG index with variation from methane, safe feed, and longevity. I think you already in Canada did a very nice job with your GHG index. I've not charged this, but I mentioned this with the Bovaer. How does that impact our genetic evaluation? So do we have G by E, and how is it influencing our genetic evaluation is really something we need to look into now, because it's coming into our data. And what level of documentation is required from our authorities, or what do we foresee also will happen around the world on this? And then, of course, also another one that I'm actually also working on right now is to explore interactions between GRFI and methane, which I plan to present at the World Congress in Madison next year. And lastly, I can't not have a presentation without, I really also like this quote by McCuffey, that you could say in the genomic era, phenotype is king. No matter how many, we can have the best possible genomic models, but we also really need some really good phenotypes to support them and train them. I'd like to finally acknowledge this is my supervision team from my PhD. So they have really been very patient with me for the last 4 years. So Gautam Sahana, Coralia Manzanilla Pech, and Jan Larsen. From QDG, I also really, we call them our grand old men, Just and Per. And then also Bjarke, Trine, and Ole also was very supportive and helped me a lot in the modeling phases. From Gentor, Nick Friggins and Pauline Martin. Also, a huge thank you to Christine and Filippo from the Resilient Dairy Genome Project. I'm also very happy that we are in the Net Zero Dairy Genome Project. I really enjoy that. And I also, lastly, thanks also to my good colleagues in the ICAR Feed and Gas Group. Right, that's it for me. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rasmus, for your presentation. I would now like to open the floor to any questions, either from people here in the room or for those joining us online. We do have a question in the room. Just a second.
Hi, Dr. Rasmus. Your presentation was really good. It's a pleasure to talk to you in a live environment. I have been following you in the social media like LinkedIn and following your work. So my PhD here is with it's NAFER, and the question I will make for you, I think it's kind of silly, but it's something that I'm facing. How can you identify the time drifting in your data to know that the time is not correct?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for the question and thanks for the kind words. You could say that's a part of this. Oh, that started back. You could say we saw it earliest with Gareth Difford's PhD around 2016. We could see if you have the clocks at the same time. We knew. Let's see if I can show it from the. I think actually, I hope you can see. Give me a second. Maybe, yeah. Do you see my screen?
Yeah.
So we know from DMS data the gate state. So we know if there's cow in or cow out. So when you compare this, you could say 0, 1 data stream from the robot with this one here. Then you can actually, when you compare those, then you could see when you know a cow is out, then the CO2 should go down because respiration air is not present anymore. So you can actually, by doing this, it is a kind of, I know Victor, when he developed the data pipeline, it is he called it noise. That's what he's looking for, the noise difference. So when there's very low noise, then he could see, right, now there's no cow in. And then when you match those two data lines, so you should see they come together, then you can see sometimes they drift, one of them drift. We solved it mainly, it's not a big issue anymore, so it's down to a few seconds, but we could, before we had GPS clocks installed in our sniffers, then it was a problem. But now we have resolved it. It's not, yeah.
Okay. And from your analysis, you choose time from the milking, or you had all the milking time? For example, we are thinking about get just 5 minutes of milking, exclude the first 30 seconds.
Yeah, that's a really good. We exclude the first 30 seconds, and then we also exclude, how is it, after, I think it's after 5 minutes, yeah, because we see the variation is so high because the cow starts to move the nose around. So yeah, you should try to somehow find a way to truncate the data. That would be good.
Okay. It is all for me. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Please, Timothy.
I think it's in the chat one.
Can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
We have a question in the room, so let's go first with that. You can go.
Oh no, I'm just not sure if this works. Hello?
Just 1 second.
Oh, is it? Okay. Oh. Hear me now?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I had a quick question. How does the government plan on actually estimating the carbon tax for this?
So okay, how they plan the carbon tax, or how do you mean? So more how they
Like how do they plan on measuring the carbon at the farms for the taxing?
Yeah, that we're also very interested in to hear. They don't know yet.
Okay.
But I get, so this is again, I don't. This is the best guess we have at the moment. They're gonna look at, okay, how many cows do you have? What breed do you have? Do you have a large or small breed? what is the milk production level, what do you feed them, you read it down to that level. We're not expecting they're going to go and measure individual animals, or they're likely also looking at what system do you have, flatter floor, concrete floor. How you treat the manure is also quite important. Do you put it for biogas? Is actually also a mitigation tool, because then you get all the gas potential out of the manure. So enteric methane is actually, 45% of the carbon footprint from a cow. So they also, it's not 100% of it they're concerned about, but some of it.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
We do have a question in the chat. You want me to read that, Dr. Rasmus, or can you see that?
I could just, Thomas Strappel, is it not a problem for Nordic breeders that a new index, including feed efficiency, negatively affects udder? So the new index, so the safe feed index, yes, that's our feed efficiency index, has you could say a little, as the result indicated here, a little negative correlation, index correlation, it's important to say, to udder. But you could say our overall breeding goal is still, you could say that's the beauty when you have a breeding goal, when you put them all together, then we get progress for all of them. So no, it has actually, it was quite a good experience here, this update in February. Now I can put some more words on it, because they actually doubled the weight on the safe feed. So the old model they was very unhappy with, but now they really like the new model. So they said we put full emphasis on it. So it has actually been a good experience. And maybe this is only my speculation. I think one of the reasons we see this slight negative correlation is because when you reduce frame that much, we see some strong links between frame and udder in our population, Holsteins in particular.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Oh, thank you, Thomas. Any other question for Dr. Rasmus? I do have a question. I was thinking about the practical application of the sniffer technology. Could you comment of any challenge regarding like cost or implementation in Denmark?
Oh yeah, we have. It's well, farmers are quite happy to have it installed because this non-invasive thing, but it's the challenge is coming now that we are coming from research to be implemented. And so how does the industry take over running these? So there's some running cost, and you could say normally when we do breeding, we get the phenotypes because there's a value for the farmer to measure them. This is different. So both with the feed intake and this one, we need to create the value beforehand because we can see there's a future value. And that's I think is the biggest challenge. How do we get the highest possible accuracy for the lowest input of cost, or you could say input of money?
Okay,
and also,
thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, you can go ahead. Sorry. Okay. Any other questions for Dr. Rasmus? Oh, he's not. No questions? Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Rasmus, for your presentation. This has been a great discussion. Thank you all for joining us today, for coming to see the CGIL seminar, and see you all next weekend. Have a nice weekend.
Yeah. Thank you, and have a nice weekend.
Bye-bye. You too.